Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting. I hope you're okay and in good health. The contents of the agenda for today's meeting has been agreed by the Chief Executive in consultation with myself and the group leaders. I wish to inform Council of the death of a former councillor, Sylvia Smithson, who represented the Almondbury ward from 1995 to 2004 and also served as a member of cabinet. Can I please invite Councillor Kath Pinnick and Andrew Marchington to make.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's great sadness we note Sylvia's death. She made a huge contribution to the council for the time that she was a member, and in particular in the area of social services. And I think Kath will talk a little bit more about her time as a cabinet member with responsibility for social services. It was certainly a time when we saw significant improvements in social services, and that was recognised by the council, the people who received those services, and nationally. A few of us managed to go up to Sylvia's funeral just before Christmas. We stood out in the rain and paid tribute to Sylvia. It was a privilege to be able to do that. She was a great campaigner for the people of Almondbury. They were concerned, but also for the Liberal Democrats as well. And I think just the group's prayers, and hopefully the thoughts and prayers, and hopefully the thoughts and prayers of the council are with Sylvia's family, in particular John, who a lot of us will know, and the family as well, and as they get through this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for drawing the attention of the council to the sad death of Sylvia Smithson. As you noted, she was a councillor from 1995 to 2004. In 1995, she was elected to the council in a by-election after the sudden and tragic death of one of the Almondbury Liberal Democrat councillors. And she won this hard-fought campaign handsomely, which I think is a tribute to her commitment and her the residents of Almondbury wanting her to be their councillor. And she retired prior to the 2004 elections. So she retired by choice. She was a cabinet member for adult social services for a couple of years, and she was an absolute fierce and persistent and committed advocate for the individuals who were receiving adult social care, particularly older people. It was always her top concern were the needs of individuals, and she was always willing to robustly challenge officers who perhaps didn't want to take on the issue she was promoting. Particularly, she was an early advocate for independent payments, which obviously was a difficult one for organisations to accept. But she persisted with it for the benefit of individuals, and that's what she was, an absolute liberal through and through, who put the needs of individuals and the community first. And as many of you, as Councillor Marchington has said, you know, there was a liberal household in the heart of Almondbury, with both Sylvia and John Smithson being councillors, and had devoted their lives to the cause of their community and to the cause of liberalism. So they've been married for over 50 years. So it's a huge, sad time for John and his family, and our thoughts and prayers go out to them all at this difficult time.
Thank you for that. Please can I remind members to Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to pay my tribute on behalf of my Labour group. I'm sure there's some in my group who will know Sylvia well. I got elected in 2002, so I had the privilege of working with Sylvia for a couple of years. She was on the council, and she was a very dedicated and very individual person, and she was also a cabinet lead for social care. And she had a certain way about her. I never found her to be aggressive or dismissive, and you know, she was an example of how a good councillor and a good cabinet member can behave, despite the numerous challenges that we were facing at that moment in time because of the transformation. So I'd just like to echo what my previous colleague said. She will be missed. It's a hard time for John Smithson, who was a partner, and the family, and our thoughts and our best wishes are with them all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Who's next? Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I'd like to pay my tribute to, and that of the Green Group, to Sylvia. She was a really diligent and hard-working cabinet member on social services, and she had a bit of a fierce side to her, which was great actually, because you wanted somebody like that who's batting for people, and she certainly did that, and you really felt that the people she was responsible for in social services were in safe hands, and that's what you want out of a cabinet member. And I'm really obviously sad to see that she's gone, and thoughts are with John at this time.
Thank you for that. I think there's nobody else. All right, thank you. Please can I remind members to only speak when I have invited them to do so, and to use the chat function if you wish to speak. Please do not use the chat for any other purpose than requesting to speak, and please do not register to speak on agenda item in advance of that item commencing. The voting for agenda item 5 and 6 will be done by exception, and members wishing to express disintention from the recommendations should indicate so in the chats bar. The voting for agenda 7 will be done by roll call. Council Procedure Rule 13 relating to the purpose of agenda item 9 will be applied. Instead of a period of 45 minutes will be allocated, allowing members of the council to ask oral questions to cabinet members. Also, there will be a 15-minute break in the meeting at approximately 6:45. Can I just invite Chief Executive to say a few things about the lockdown.
Good evening, councillors. On the 4th of January 2021, the Prime Minister announced that England would be placed in a national lockdown due to increasing COVID-19 rates. These restrictions are vital in reducing transmission of the virus by limiting contact. The new variant, first identified in South East England, does not appear to cause more serious illness, but it is significantly more transmissible. Our latest estimates is that the new strain now accounts for around 1 in 3 of all new cases in Kirklees. This is an increase from around 1 in 10 last month. In the latter part of 2020, we saw overall infections in Kirklees fall sharply to give us some of the lowest rates in the country. But in the past 3 weeks, new cases have increased once again. Last week, new infections increased by more than 60%. It means that it is vital that everyone stays at home except for essential reasons or if they are a frontline worker. The basic public health advice, hands, face, space, is as important now as it has been throughout the pandemic. Acting like you or anyone you come into contact with has the virus helps to keep to the rules. The council will be continuing to run essential services for our residents, as well as delivering rapid testing for the borough's critical workers. We have also offered our assistance to the NHS to support with the vaccination programme. We will be constantly reviewing our service delivery as we move through this critical phase of the pandemic. All councillors will be kept informed of any proposed changes to service delivery, and all details will be made available to residents on the council's website.
Thank you for that. We're on item 2 now. Can I ask group business managers to advise if there are any further apologies? We have got apologies from Councillor Patrick. Any other apologies? Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I was just about to say about Councillor Patrick, but you beat me to it, so I've put my hand down. Thank you.
Councillor Monroe?
Hello. Yes, I'd like to give apologies for Councillor Christine Iredale. Unfortunately, she can't be with us this evening.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mohan?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Mr. Mayor, apology from Councillor Darren O'Donovan.
Okay,
Thank you.
Is that it? Yeah. Can we move on to item 3? I move that the minutes of the meeting held on 25th November 2020 be approved as correct record. Is that seconded, Councillor Sokol?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, in the absence of Deputy Mayor, I second the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that carried? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Item 4. Does any member wish to declare an interest in any of the agenda items? Have any indicated that they wish to declare an interest? So there's nobody there, so we'll move on to item 5. Council is asked to consider, comment and endorse the Children and Young People's Partnership Plan and note the work of the Children and Young People's Partnership. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did previously have a Children and Young People's Partnership, which was paused to focus resources on the Children's Improvement Board, which I'm sure colleagues I clearly agree with. It was much needed. The previous partnership was a closed membership board, very formal, and we also had a statutory duty for Children and Young People's Plan. In March 2019, the partnership was relaunched, but this time as an open membership of public sector, third sector, community organisations, in effect a cross-section of organisations that work with children and young people across Kirklees. The partnership enables a much wider range of opportunities to hear the views of children and young people and to gather much wider information and intelligence and data. Initially, the partnership identified 6 priorities, and they're listed on page 9 of this report. And cross-service groups and boards now lead on those priorities with the support of the partnership. A further 3 priorities have since been identified and are listed under 2.5.4 of the report and feature in the diagram in the report on page 16. Whilst these are new priorities, it doesn't by any means mean that the original 6 priorities are left behind, because work is continuing on those. The new plan came to Cabinet in July last year, 2020, and I had hoped that this report would have been at Council earlier than this, but obviously there've been an enormous number of really quite key and vital issues that Council have had to address in recent months. So it is here today for Council. It is impressive how the partnership is made up of such skilled and committed partners working with our young people with an open and inclusive agenda to support Kirklees children to have the best start in life. I recommend the report to Council today. Mr Mayor, I move that the Council endorses the 2020-23 Children and Young People's Partnership Plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is that seconded?
Yes, I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any comments, Councillor Monroe?
Oh, it's an old hand. It's Councillor Khan first.
Is it Councillor Khan?
It was Councillor Monroe first.
It's an old hand.
Previous item. So it's Councillor Khan. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in support of this updated Kirklees and Children and Young People's Partnership Plan because it so relates to achieving the health outcomes that we want to achieve. It complements our public health approach in terms of trying to tackle issues more upstream with early intervention and prevention and addressing health inequalities across the borough. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit more detail about the 3 new additional priorities and why we've picked these. So in terms of effects of poverty on children, we already know that poverty impacts negatively on future health outcomes, both physically and mentally. And this has been documented by numerous longitudinal research and studies. And we have a much better understanding of how the environment interacts with physiological changes during a child's development. Neurologists have studied changes in the brain triggered by childhood stresses, and childhood experience of poverty is a significant stressor and is likely to have a detrimental impact throughout the life course. Analysis of local data in relation to educational attainment demonstrates significant disparities between those pupils on free school meals and those who aren't. The challenges for Kirklees as a local authority are particularly profound. The numbers of claims for free school meals has steadily risen year on year, and we've seen a particularly sharp rise over the last several months. In January last year, 2020, 19% of primary school pupils were eligible for free school meals, and the national figure is 17.7%. For secondary schools, locally, 22.8% of school pupils were eligible for free school meals, where the national figure is around 16%. And shockingly, 2/3 of these children on free school meals are from working families. So in terms of LGBTQ young people, our young people survey that demonstrated low levels of good mental health reported by young LGBTQ people in comparison to the wider population, and LGBTQ people experience a number of health disparities. They're at a higher risk of certain conditions, have less access to healthcare, and have worse health outcomes, both in terms of physical and mental health. And in terms of our youth offer, we know that social, leisure and recreational provision for children and young people is paramount to good mental and emotional health. And what happens during childhood often has a long-lasting impact and can impact on education and employment attainment throughout the life cycle. So we have vast health inequalities in Kirklees, which will impact negatively on future demand and pressures on adult social care and the health service. So by adding additional investment now into children and young people and targeting these particular groups, we can improve health and employment outcomes for people in adult life. And can I finally take this opportunity to commend staff and members for this sterling piece of work? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can we have Councillor Anthony Smith, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to highlight some of the work that we've done in the Colne Valley Place Partnership around young people's mental health. And I welcome the broad approach that the report takes to involving members from across Kirklees and other parties. And I would like to think that any examples of good practice or innovative programs, such as the one we've developed in Colne Valley, will be looked at and taken on board to see how they can be built on and developed and feed into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have Councillor Andrew Marchington, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I primarily want to talk about young people's voice, children and young people's voice, but also I just want to respond slightly to what Councillor Carnes just said about children and poverty. Just want to really highlight the fantastic work that's been done with our youth council and their engagement with children and young people. It's I like the phrase in there that we want that children and young people services want to work with our young people and not do things to them. And I think there has been strides in that respect. And I think it's important whenever any decision is made in this area that we find ways of listening to the young people's voice, ideally engaging them with them directly, speaking about the issues that affect them, whether that's about school or whether it's children's services or whether it's the youth offer, because their direct lived experience ought to enable us to make better decisions. And also involving them in decision making. I mean, I know we found in the Colne Valley when we've talked to young people before, their cares and concerns are very similar to that of the wider other residents as well. And then it's really important to get them involved as being active and participatory citizens, not just about their own issues, but the issues of the community and the people in the area where they live. I think all of us are concerned about poverty, whoever might be experiencing that, and obviously children who live in poverty as a lifelong impact. What concerns me a little bit about what Councillor Khan said is, I mean, we talked about investment, and yes, we need to invest to make sure to alleviate the effects of poverty in children and people. But what's that? Where's the detail? A lot of praise for Councillor Kendrick and the leadership that she's provided for children and young people services. I know that last summer previous summer, Kirklees already had in place a programme for making sure that children and young people who are on free school meals received meals throughout the summer. We've seen that's been really important during lockdown. Big thank you to Marcus Rashford for raising that issue and continuing. And I hope we continue to keep that as an issue. Some of us have known about that for a long time, and I know Liberal Democrat colleagues in Hull piloted a summer project many years ago. So it's not just about saying we need more investment, it's the right type of investment in this area. Again, some of the lessons that this council learnt about, and when Liberal Democrats were leading on neighbourhood renewal, the investment that we made in children's services was about making sure they had the best, improving their life chances, their outcomes. And one of the things that we found both locally and across the borough is about raising young people's aspirations and the aspirations of their family, making sure that the people are aware that there are businesses working in employing local people. What sort of training and skills do children and young people need to be able to access that sort of employment? We still know, I mean, even under lockdown, we've still got employers taking on apprentices, taking on people for employment, and we need to make sure that particularly children from the poorest families know about that. So don't just say, oh, there's nothing for me to do, there's nothing available. Actually, there might be, and we should be encouraging them to look for that, and also making sure in school settings and college settings they get the most appropriate training to do that. So, and of course, getting appropriate training, getting into a job that pays them a living wage is actually one of the ways that that takes them out of poverty personally, but that sets up their family. Also meaning future generations don't suffer some of the effects of poverty that might have happened before. So welcome any investment in children and young people's services, but also I'd like a bit more detail about where that's going to be targeted, and particularly about pathways for children and young people through education and training into employment, and preferably employment with local employers, making that connection between the two. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor John Lawson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I welcome this report and the work that's gone into it from all the officers and the people involved and the members of the partnership. I'd like to focus on these 3 new areas because those are actually really quite exciting. So they're highlighted on page 21 of our report pack. I'll take the third first, if that's not too odd. And it's about the growth of the youth offer. And I think this and the whole of the report is what is known as STC, which is subject to COVID. And while it's right and appropriate that we should be talking about and planning for places for young people to go, I think the rest of the council understands that this is going to take time. Now, we can and should, though, use this time to reflect on what's on offer and what direction we want to go in, and how we can reimagine those offers post-COVID. So we ask ourselves questions: are there going to be any new spaces available post-COVID due to how council work is rearranged? Are there going to be any new buildings coming online that we could use? And what are the learning things that we can take away in terms of digital engagement that we're already using? You know, that we find effective now, and how can we incorporate those into how we're working? To work up the page to the middle item, I'm delighted to see that the LGBT inclusion and outcomes item as a priority. Again, it feels long overdue, but looking at the timelines, we can see in the report that, you know, the pandemic is to blame for a little bit of that. So we need to make allowances for that. Now, I would like to know if there's been any work carried out digitally, or in terms of any available train the trainer work, either among the school staff or our officers, which would increase that all important access to trusted adults. And that's a very important piece of work going forward. It's highlighted in the report, but it's important to stress it. The emphasis on age appropriate inclusive curriculum has been highlighted as an effective way of tackling the bullying that nearly half of the LGBT pupils experience in today's schools. I'd be interested to know what progress is being made in the development of that curriculum, whether there's anything coming from government or whether it's anything that we're developing ourselves that can aid that. The top item on page 21 is the effects of poverty on children. The figure of 18,020 children in the borough makes for bleak, quite frankly, heartbreaking reading. And again, we know this is being compounded by the pandemic. Now, along with the wider tackling poverty strategy, I think it would be good for council to see all of this as refreshed with a COVID context. There is a specific academic work being carried out in this area. One example is Dr. Ruth Patrick at York University. I don't know whether anybody has come across this, who in conjunction with Birmingham University and CPAG are looking to collect data from other studies and from families to record their experiences. And if we can make use of this work, it makes our strategies stronger, and we must let it inform our work that we do here in Kirklees. At the moment, we don't have any motions at council, but if we did, there'd be one from the Liberal Democrat group about contacting government to extend the universal credit uplift. If COVID has highlighted one thing in this area, it's that it's expensive to be poor. If we don't live near a big supermarket and have no car, you pay more for your food. If your children are studying at home, everything from heating to printer ink is an extra cost. A case study on the BBC the other night rightly highlighted that when some of us are able to squirrel away a few quid saved on travel or those lattes, it's costing less well-off families a lot more to actually just get by. I know this is a report conceived before the pandemic and sets out plans for the next couple of years, but it's worth remembering that when we're all saying to each other, how about that COVID, eh? What a thing that was. These families will still be struggling with the effects that they're experiencing.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Matt. All done. Well timed, eh?
Thank you for that. Can we have Councillor John Taylor, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pay tribute to the staff that worked on this report. There's an awful lot of information in here, and there's a lot of this that, you know, I'm fully behind and support. I think where I have some, and it's an issue I've talked about a number of times at council. I have some worries is when we talk about things as plans, I kind of, in my mind, a plan has, you know, detailed proposals and it has outcomes and targets and timelines. And this feels more like a vision document than a plan. It's kind of at a higher level and it doesn't have the detail for us to go, how will we scrutinise this and how will we ensure that we're being successful? Because any intervention that we make, we need to understand what the current situation is and what our aim or ambition is in that area. And if we don't have that, we won't know whether that intervention was successful or not. So I think there's more that could be done in terms of lifting this so that we have that clear line of sight, both in terms of what our ambitions are, but what we see as being successful in that area. There are a couple of other things I'd like to just pick up on, and it won't surprise a number of you on this call. There is a section here on page 19 about tackling inequality, which I fully support, and I particularly like the reference in the first couple of sentences in the second paragraph about the impact that personal circumstances and inequalities have on groups and individuals and lead to poorer outcomes. And I talk particularly about educational outcomes. And yet, despite repeatedly raising the issue around the group that has the worst educational outcomes being white working class boys on free school meals, there's no reference to it anywhere in this report. And that disappoints me because it suggests that perhaps they are once more being overlooked whilst we talk about other groups. And part of that, I think, is a problem with the intelligence we have because we don't collect the data in a way that will support that. I mean, I was reading a report today from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, and I'm just going to quote to you just a line from that report. So when they look at educational outcomes, what they find is that just 8% of white boys on free school meals, comprehensive schools in the poorest fifth of areas go to university. In comparison, 85% of Asian girls not on free school meals do go to university. So that shows you the educational gap and the inequality that exists there that we as a council don't seem to have grasped yet, and we don't seem to have anything that actually is specified that would particularly tackle or address that. It also worries me sometimes when we treat everyone who's BME as having the same background and potential outcomes when there is wide differences within and across those communities, just as there are within and across the white community. And we need to look a bit more carefully at how you're making sure that we are supporting those who are most in need. And I think to an extent we are neglecting some of that. It is, and I think, you know, it's no discredit to anyone that this is, you know, coming to us a little later than when it was first produced. And as other colleagues have commented, it would be good to see an update on this, to see what progress has been made since this was first written. And as I say, there's a lot here to be commended, but I think there are also areas where I think there are omissions. I also worry when we talk about terms, but we don't define them. There's a lot of talk about inequality of outcomes, but actually, probably more importantly,
Councillor Taylor, 30 seconds.
Yeah, is understanding the inequality of opportunities, because it's actual opportunities that are important, that we make sure everybody has the same opportunities, the same chances, the same ability to make the best of their lives. I'll finish there, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to follow on from what Councillor Anthony Smith said a bit earlier about work that the Colne Valley Place Partnership has been doing, and just say a few words about what the Spen Valley and Murfield Place Partnership has been up to. And I'll be quite honest and say that as a lead in the Place Partnership, getting money for mental health issues it took us all quite a while to work out exactly what it was that we wanted to spend the money on. However, members of our Place Partnership came up with a brilliant idea. Well, I think it's a brilliant idea of providing money for schools or school partnerships to work up a program for helping children coming back from the original lockdown. When we provided £120,000, which is quite a lot in terms of 1/7 of the area of Kirklees, for schools to bid into, and some of the submissions have been really brilliant, and clearly indicate how hard our professionals in schools and associated with schools have worked to work out how to spend this money in a very professional and logical manner. And I think it's been, only time will tell how successful it becomes, but judging by the submissions that we've seen, and they all have to be approved by the members of the Spen and Murfield Place Partnership, we've seen, as I say, some really good submissions, and I like Councillor Smith, would like to see that something similar is considered for rolling out across other parts of Kirklees, because I fully anticipate that what we've done in Spen Valley and Murfield will reap rewards in terms of looking after children, some of whom have suffered quite badly from being out of school and in maybe in some cases in awful circumstances. Not all of them, I hasten to add, because mental health issues can be quite subtle and unapparent in a lot of cases until people start talking one-to-one. So I really want that as an addition, if you like, to what is presented in this report, which generally speaking I think does a really good job. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Carol Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to unmute myself. I did want to say earlier that yes, whilst this has been delayed in coming to council, and it is some time since this was first written now, it still is business as usual. And yes, I mean, the work of schools and the learning of children in schools has certainly been disrupted by COVID. But as far as possible, all the ambitions in this children and young people's plan are those which are still those of both social care and the learning services as well. And I do want to assure Councillor Taylor that we do collect all the information on all the inequalities, and of course COVID has shone and highlighted a light on the inequalities and the inconsistencies that there are across our schools. But we certainly do collect all that data, and certainly the issue that he raised of white working class boys has long been an issue, unfortunately, in our schools, and not just in Kirklees schools, of course. And it is something that the Learning Services and the Education Learning Partnership Board, which is a party to, of course, the Children and Young People's Plan, are aware of. And there's lots of work that is going on in schools to actually try to to address that particular issue. So our ambitions are not waned or not by COVID or the length of the delay in getting this to plan here today. We've been working to it, and in many ways, I think the delay and the response that we've had to make to COVID has only heightened our ambitions to make sure that our children all of our children do achieve and aspire to doing the best that they can and get the most that they can out of life. Thank you.
With that, Councillor Alison Munro.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just briefly. I'd just like to say, while I appreciate the need to reduce the effects of poverty on children, and you want to do it via the poverty strategy, I just wondered what the council is doing to create real sustainable jobs with a living wage, as this would help to address issues around poverty and create good positive role models in families for children to adhere to. And I just wondered if you could answer that question, please.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to pick up some of the points that Councillor Taylor seems to be making, and I'd like to endorse what Councillor Patterson has said, which is that we've got to tackle poverty, and without it, we cannot have sustainable, long-term ambition for all our children. And you know, we have been making these points for a long time, and in order to pick up the point that Councillor Munro makes about creating, quite honestly, possibly another decade of poverty, I cannot see us trying to create enough sustainable jobs for our young people. They deserve the best, but can we level up that agenda? The divide between north and south, it's going to be ever so difficult. So it will need all of us to pull together rather than make party political points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pando.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and firstly, thanks to all our officers and to Viv and Carol, who I know are extremely committed behind this agenda and are working with a set of givens and a set of limited resources, and the work they've been doing is like always trying to actually play catch up, because you know, with the best will in the world, you know, and again, I've seen this over a number of administrations, like our officers and our elected members, whoever they are, will do their best. But we are constrained, we are in a straitjacket. And let me just explain why this is the situation. And just the headline figures, 60,000 households in Kirklees live in poverty. That is a stark statistic, and that is the statistics I want to focus on. I'm not too interested in the detail around performance managing and monitoring and all the rest of it. Yeah, you know, this is what our communities are facing. 60,000 households in the 21st century. It's a blight on our society. 18,000 kids, that's 1 in 5 living in poverty. You know, again, right? Yeah, you know, I'm sure that this is replicated right across the country, but we've got to understand where we have been. First and foremost, the close of Short Start centres was a massive blight and massive impact because that one-to-one contact that parents, that John Taylor and Naheed and Alison and Carol and everybody else is talking about, yeah, have been directly impacted. You know, I know in my own ward, this was a lifeline to parents. You know, it doesn't matter if it's white parents, Asian parents, Chinese, Asian, you know, it was people living in poverty, people who are working class, ordinary families having a massive impact on them. And I'll tell you what that impact meant. Health visitors, basic health visiting was actually reduced overnight. Before they could actually go into the Short Start centres and they'd be seen. Midwives, you know, the service that they were getting, that one-to-one contact, was completely gone. And baby clinics. When I used to work in Leeds Community Healthcare Trust during the Short Start centre era, the baby clinics were a vibrant centre where little kids with young mums and dads would come and actually see their kids got a good start in life. That 0 to 19 provision has been completely stripped out. The heart of a young generation has been stripped out, and that's what we're facing. And the discontinuation of locally commissioned vitamin provisions for pregnant women. Yeah, so you're not even talking about 0 to 19, you're actually talking about pre-birth. That's actually been completely stripped out, and that's actually quite a shame. And we need to actually find ways to actually how we can pull together and lobby, no matter which government is in power, to actually get the services back in. And the universal credit fiasco has actually meant that a lot of people who are actually automatically getting certain benefits was automatically reduced. And I'll give you an example of that. The Healthy Start program, overnight, from around 3,000 eligible kids, we went down to 1,000. And that was a direct impact of the changes that were made nationally. It didn't seem that they was actually joined up working. So although I would take criticism on the chin, we also need to understand, right, yeah, that we can only do what we can based on what we are given. So our outcomes based on the money we're getting more outcomes. And what we should do, we should actually come together and continue to actually knock on Whitehall door to actually make sure that we get all the provision that we need to actually get our kids to a good start in life. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Right of reply, Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wow, what a lot of comments and good points made. I have to say, Mr. Mayor, I am very buoyed up, even by the "this is a good plan, but" or "what about," because actually all the things all of you are saying are there, but not in this report, unless you want something coming, Mr. Mayor, the size of Encyclopedia Britannica. It is at all the other groups and boards that some of you are involved in, where this information comes and the detail is there. The strength for me about the partnership, Children and Young People's Partnership, is it works across all sectors and services to bring people together to understand issues. And it means there's a chance of us changing systems, not just services. And poverty is one of those things. No one organisation grouping can change poverty on their own, one service. So, you know, I very much welcome the comments that you've all made. I have written them down, and I will follow up 1 or 2 points to make sure that they are definitely included, but I'm pretty sure they are. As far as the jobs goes, and for Councillor Munro, this isn't just the role of the Children and Young People's Partnership. It's much broader across the authority. But, you know, I seem to remember one of our officers being photographed and filmed at the Huddersfield Town Stadium about the launch of a whole new entry into employment through our partners there. Unfortunately, if Kirklees Active Leisure were working, or they can't be at the moment because of the lockdown, they'd already set up a whole series of apprenticeships and particular entries into employment for a lot of our care leavers, which I've found absolutely fantastic. We have taken on extra people, jobs in the council, some people helping out at the testing centres are new people in new jobs, local people that this council has taken on. And, you know, we certainly are pursuing as a council and developing a lot of apprenticeships, but also talking to our partner organisations in health and so on about doing the same. And there are very encouraging signs. But as I say, that isn't just the role of this partnership board. It is much wider across the council. But can I say thank you to colleagues for the discussion and the points you've made. And if you want greater detail, I can suggest that you look at some of the boards and partnerships reports that go there, or if you get in touch, we will make sure you have information that you require. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. We now move to the vote. Are members in favour of, all members in favour of the recommendation? If any members wish to dissent, please indicate in the chat box. I'm sorry, is he already?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that's carried, yeah?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Who's that?
It's Councillor Lukic.
Yep.
As there's a very large number of members indicating in the chat box, I think it would be best if we took a recorded vote on this. So under the council procedure rules, can I request a recorded vote, please?
Yeah. Is there a second for that? Anybody seconding that?
I don't think it requires a seconder. I think any member can request a recorded vote on an item.
We'll just clarify this. Just give us a couple of minutes.
Point of clarity, if I may, please, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Bolt.
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Lukic's point, how are the members of the public who may be watching going to know which way any member of the council votes? What you said originally, we were doing it by exception, which meant that those who didn't agree should vote in the chat box. There are many people who have put their votes in support in the chat box. How are the members of the public are going to know how anybody is voting? If it was in the chamber, yeah, we'd either vote on the screen or we'd be saying it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Bolt. We'll go to the roll. We'll do the vote then. Yeah. Okay. Who's?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Okay, members, so you're voting on the recommendation moved by Councillor Kendrick, and yeah, if you could please state for, against, or abstain. Councillor Pandor. Councillor Pandor.
Unmute yourself, Shabir.
Councillor Pan, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I had my mute on. Apologies, Mayor.
Councillor David Hall.
Abstain.
Councillor Lawson.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Greaves.
For.
Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Armour.
My apologies, abstain.
Councillor Asif.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
Abstain.
Councillor Bolt.
Abstain.
Councillor Burke.
For.
Councillor Butt.
For.
Councillor Dadd.
For.
Councillor Paola Davis. Councillor Paola Davis. No, Councillor for Councillor Paul Davis.
For.
Councillor Eastwood.
For.
Councillor Donald Firth. Councillor Donald Firth. Councillor Eric Firth.
For.
Councillor Granger Mead.
Abstain.
Councillor Steve Hall.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
Abstain.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Homewood.
For.
Councillor Mumtaz Hussain.
For.
Councillor Yusra Hussain.
For.
Councillor Korshik.
For.
Councillor Kendrick.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Lees Hamilton.
Abstain.
Councillor Lee Richards.
For.
Councillor Lunat. Councillor Lunat. Councillor Lowe.
For.
Councillor Lukic.
For.
Councillor Lyons.
For.
Councillor Marchington.
For.
Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor McBride.
For.
Councillor McGuinn. Councillor McGuinn. Councillor Munro.
For.
Councillor Murgatroyd.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Pervez.
For.
Councillor Amanda Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Kath Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Sorwar.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Smage.
Abstain.
Councillor Anthony Smith.
For.
Councillor Richard Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor John Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Taylor.
Abstain.
Councillor Mark Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Uller.
For.
Councillor Uppal.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Warner.
For.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Councillor White.
For.
And Councillor Zaman.
For.
Thank you. That's carried, Chair, then. Thank you.
Thank you. That is carried. Now we move on to item 6. Council is asked to note the half-yearly monitoring on Treasury management activity 2020 and 2021. Councillor Taylor, Councillor Turner.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is, as you rightly said, is the half-yearly Treasury management report. This report has already been to the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee on the 24th of November and was also at Cabinet on the 15th of December. As we well know, interest rates are at an historically low level, and it would seem that this is a likely case to be for some time yet. And whilst it's good for our prudential borrowing, it does mean that our investments don't attract a high rate of return. Again, this is likely to be the case for some time, given the current economic outlook. I do believe we have a healthy spread of investments, which does protect us to some degree from market fluctuations and ensures we do see a reasonable return on the public's money. The last 6 months covered by this report have been very challenging for us in managing our cash flow, as at times we've seen large amounts of money deposited in our bank as the government has rightly supported businesses through various schemes which we have administered on their behalf. So I'd like to thank our officers and our external partners, Arlington Close, for the hard work they put in ensuring our cash flow is well managed and ensuring that we also receive the best return on our investments. Within our investment strategy, I've taken a limited risk with our residents' money. I would also like to just thank Arlington Close for the ongoing support they provide in giving training to the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee annually. Mr. Mayor, I move that the half-yearly monitoring on Treasury management activity 22 to 2021 be noted. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is that seconded?
Yes, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Pando?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd like to second that and reserve my right to reply. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation has now been moved and seconded. Are there any comments on this? Councillor John Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. Treasury management reports. They're not the juiciest of reports. It's got to be said. Sometimes what they say is nothing happened, which can be a very good thing in turbulent times. Is that has to be said too. This has also gone through the corporate governance panel, so I'll just make very brief observations. The economic context for this, for all its density, seems a bit brief. So the section that we've got on the explanation of the background and the economic context seems a bit brief. Was this the whole of what we got from Arlene Close, or is there a longer, or let's face it, even more exciting version available? Sorry if I've missed the link elsewhere in the report, but if that's everything, then that's everything. We'll have to deal with that. Arlene Close also confirmed that The Public Works Loans Board had increased the rate to 1.8% and was considered expensive. I trust that we're going elsewhere in the market for borrowing, for the blueprint and so on. If I recall, Councillor Turner has said that before, but confirmation is always good in this case. I think that the attitudes to risk, to investment at this time is right. It should be low risk and quick access. That's a strategy that always forgoes high returns. And that's clear when we see the returns for the amount of money that we've got tied up, which is around 43 million, I think, in investment. Couple of things missing here that I would like to have seen. I think we might have expected a column or two on the loans we have made. We have or are about to make a couple of substantial loans in the regeneration area, and it'd be good to see that kind of wider picture and see it in the round a little. I would also have liked to have seen the amount of revenue released by the completion of repayment of borrowing, especially on those loans with historically high rates of interest. I'd like just to see how that revenue then impacts on the figure of the 10.8 million spent net on interest payments mentioned in the Cabinet minutes on the same item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Andrew Marchington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, appreciate the report. I mean, obviously, there's quite a lot of work being done by officers on our Treasury management, our investments. Just a couple of points I want to make, a couple of cautions. Both of them on page 29. The first one, 2.5. Just to note, Bank of England thinking about negative interest rates and the potential impact of that on any of our what would have been investments, savings and investments. At the moment, our investments are only raising about 43,000 a year, not a huge amount on that amount of money, but there's potential for that to become a drain on revenue. I think that just needs to be borne in mind, depending on what rates that's set at, and that could become a drag on our investments. I think the major point, I think Councillor Lawson's touched on it, we've got £43.4 million invested, and what Treasury management is about is looking at how we smooth the resources that we use over a period of time. And sometimes when you use the word investment, we might think, oh, that's a good thing in and of itself. The real investment is how we use this to improve the lives of residents in Kirklees, particularly in activities for them, improvements to roads, improvements to points about facilities for children and young people, the way we look after our older residents, adult social care. That's the real investment. And we just need to be a bit careful that we're not, that the money that we have, the money that we are stewards of on behalf of the people of Kirklees is used as well as possible. And I just worry sometimes that we think having it, a big amount of money put away somewhere is a good thing in and of itself. And it isn't. The investment is in services for people in Kirklees, and there are opportunities at the moment because we can borrow at historically low rates. Are there infrastructure projects we could be investing in, which will, first of all, improve the lives of residents of Kirklees over time, but also reduce future revenue? The impact of future revenue. Can we do that now? And this needs to be think of particularly in post-COVID. So we're getting lots of intelligence in about the role of businesses in Kirklees and the support they need. But what investments do they need to make sure we can maximise the opportunities for employment in the future? And again, looking at skills and educational opportunities for both young people and lifelong learning. What investments can we make in that area? So there's just a couple of points there about this. So yeah, well done for managing our resources in this way, but also making sure we do use the real investment is in opportunities for people in Kirklees. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we've got no more. Oh, Councillor David Hall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow on from what Councillor Marchington has been saying, I have raised the issue previously about negative interest rates at the Fire Authority. And of course, the Treasury management people also Kirklees do the fire authority as well. Now, the answer which comes back is that actually nobody knows very much about how negative interest rates might affect the council's borrowing and investment, although gilts have already turned negative previously. And so I wonder whether, if there's not much known about it, whether we could possibly commission a piece of work to look into what the possible implications of negative interest rates could be, just so that we could get ahead of the curve. Because if we can look to see what might be the situation in 6 months' time, we can prepare for it. But if we still remain in well, we don't really know what the effects are going to be, but we haven't found out either, we might be on the back foot. Having said that, just to reiterate again, thanks to the Treasury management team, because they do turn out some super results for us year after year after year. I hope I've said this every year since I've been on. I'm sure I have. But they do manage our money very, very well, and we should be very grateful that we've got them in place doing that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, right. Can we right of reply, Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and pick as many of these points up as I can. David raised along with Councillor Marchinson, about the potential of negative interest rates, and David's right. We don't know yet how that may play out. So I think it's probably a reasonable suggestion, actually, that we ought to look at commissioning some work around what that how that may impact on us, how long that may even last. Who knows? I mean, it's been tried in the odd country up and down the world. And I saw this only yesterday, I believe. One of the members of Monetary Policy Committee was suggesting that we should have negative interest rates. It's the only person out of the 10, I believe, that's on there that suggested that. But there is some growing, obviously, feeling that may be something we can go down. Who knows? I mean, it's a strange. We really are in a strange world as far as the investments and returns on that, aren't we? I mean, it was only 6 months ago where you could buy oil for less than it was worth if you got a super tanker to hide it in. So it's up and down. It's very volatile, and that's why I think, as I said earlier, the prudential way we tackle our money and look after it with Arlington Close is a prudent and probably definitely the best way at the moment to be, not risky, but let's take a fairly steady, solid line on that. So I think you might be right, David. It might be worth having I'll have a conversation with Damon next time I speak to him, which will be later this week, and just see if there's any thoughts around that. But the other thing, of course, it's a bit like lots of things at the moment. It's a bit of a finger in the air. Who knows what's coming? So we'll see. Well, I will have a conversation with Evan on that. It's a good point. Investment. We have some. If you look at the capital plan, there's some significant investment coming up for that will invest to save around for children's services. I think that's programmed in for work to be done this year, and then hopefully actually start doing some shovels in the ground work the following year. That work is ongoing. So there is investment, and that's an investment to save. So that will come along. And it in some ways it depends what you mean by investments. There's a lot of local authorities who've had the fingers burnt by investing in things that are not core to their reason for being, if you like. And they bought things like supermarkets and car parks and all sorts of things, quite often out of their own area. So that's not something we've done. It was very clear. I made it very clear that any money we invest will be within Kirklees, and we create jobs within Kirklees, and not in effect using our money to create jobs elsewhere. So there is a significant amount of investment planned. It's not easy at the moment because obviously we don't know how long COVID is going to last, and that has an impact on getting people, shovels in the ground in effect. But as I said, there is significant investment coming in the capital plan, mostly in the next couple of years. I think it was Councillor Lawson who mentioned the PWLB. That came as a bit of a shock because they did that overnight when they increased the rates. And we had many conversations, and quite a lot of conversation with the other local authorities about this. Nobody saw it coming. So yes, along with all other local authorities, if we need to borrow money, we look around and we get the best rate. And it's not always a PWRB, but we do shop around and we make sure we absolutely get the best rate. I mean, one of the side effects of the PWRB putting their rates up was the fact that it impacted on the government's budget because everybody stopped borrowing from them. So they had a hit to their bottom line. So there was a not a quick turnaround, but they did change and did start to lower the rates. But it was a unforeseen circumstance, perhaps one department not talking to another one. Length of report, we could probably make it as thick as a Bible, as Viv's report could have been. But I think this is a reasonable summary of what goes on in Treasury management. And I think, as you rightly said, for most people, it's not the most interesting of reads. I mean, as you will appreciate, I read it, but I think that's a reasonable length. But if you want more, John, I'm quite happy to ask him to do it. I'm not sure anybody will agree with you. So yeah, okay, I think I've covered most of the questions there. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. If anybody has got any other questions outside of here, just email me and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will now move to the vote. Are all members in favour of the recommendation? If any members wish to dissent, please indicate in the dissent in the chat box. We're going to go to the roll call. So can we go down that route, please?
Some clarity, please, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, can thank you. This report has been brought here for note, and I note that people are already expressing their potential voting intentions. How can you vote either way on noting something? It's not something it's there, you note it. You can't say I don't note it because you've already read it and seen it. Matters for note do not require a vote, if you can understand. Notes, no vote. That always used to be the practice we worked on anyway when I sat in that chair, Mr. Mayor. If anybody wished to express their dissent, they should have moved an alternative. It was moved and seconded, which again, matters for not necessarily don't need to. But I suggest if people wish to differ, they should have moved an alternative recommendation.
Right, thank you, Councillor Bott, and thank you very much for putting us right. Right, you're 100% right. We're going to move on to the next item. Thank you. Right, we're on item 7. Council is asked to appoint a member of Chair of Standards Committee following the resignation of Councillor Paula Davies. Councillor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Councillor Eric Firth be appointed as Chair of the Standards Committee for the remainder of the municipal year. Is it okay?
Thank you for that, Councillor Sokol. Is that seconded?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Are there any comments or further nominations? Councillor Hall. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative nominee, please, Councillor Bill Armour.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that. It's Councillor John Taylor. Thank you.
Give us a couple of minutes. Councillor David Hall, can you just give us a couple of minutes?
Bill Arm is not on the committee, I think.
Now there's Eric.
Councillor Hall, is Councillor Bill Armour on the committee?
Does he have to be?
Yeah, he has to be on the committee to be the chair.
Oh, but yeah, Bill sat on many standards committee meetings with myself, Mr. Mayor.
Well, that's the information I've got, that you have to be a member to be a chair.
You need to clarify with the member.
Just give us a couple of minutes. Right, he's not on the committee, so he can't be the chair.
Does he want to do an alternative?
Do you want somebody else to forward somebody else's name? Hall, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here, Mr. Mayor. Not at this point, thank you.
Right, thank you. We will now move to the vote by roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, members, you are voting on the recommendation for Councillor Eric Firth to be Chair of Standards Committee. Councillor, if you can indicate for, against or abstain. Councillor Pandor?
For.
Councillor David Hall?
Against.
Councillor Lawson?
Abstain.
Councillor Cooper?
For.
Councillor Greaves?
For.
Councillor Ahmed?
Hello?
Councillor Akhtar?
For. Hello?
Councillor Allison?
For.
Councillor Armour?
Against.
Councillor Asif?
For.
Councillor Bellamy?
Against.
Councillor Bolt?
Against.
Councillor Burke?
Abstain.
Councillor Butt?
For.
Councillor Dadd?
For.
Councillor Paula Davis? Councillor Paula Davis? Councillor Paul Davis?
For.
Councillor Eastwood?
Abstain.
Councillor Donald Firth?
Against.
Councillor Eric Firth? Councillor Eric Firth? Councillor Granger Mead?
Against.
Councillor Steve Hall? Councillor Steve Hall? Councillor Holmes?
Against.
Councillor Hill?
For.
Councillor Homewood? Councillor Mumtaz Hussain? Councillor Mumtaz Hussain?
For.
Councillor Yusra Hussain?
For.
Councillor Kaushik?
For.
Councillor Kendrick?
For.
Councillor Khan?
For.
Councillor Lees Hamilton?
Against.
Councillor Lee Richards? For. Councillor Lunat? Councillor Lunat? Councillor Lowe?
For.
Councillor Lukic?
Against.
Councillor Lyons?
For.
Councillor Marchington?
Abstain.
Councillor Mather?
For.
Councillor McBride? Councillor McBride?
For, sorry.
Councillor McGuinn? Councillor McGuinn? Councillor Monroe?
Abstain.
Councillor Murgatroyd?
For.
Councillor Patterson?
For.
Councillor Pervez? Councillor Pervez? Councillor Amanda Pinnock?
For.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock?
Abstain.
Councillor Kath Pinnock?
Abstain.
Councillor Sarwar?
For.
Councillor Scott?
For.
Councillor Simpson?
For.
Councillor Smage?
Against.
Councillor Anthony Smith? Councillor Richard Smith?
Against.
Councillor Sokol?
For.
Councillor John Taylor?
Against.
Councillor Kath Taylor?
Against.
Councillor Thompson?
Against.
Councillor Turner,
For.
Councillor Uller,
For.
Councillor Uppel,
For.
Councillor Walker,
For.
Councillor Warner,
For.
Councillor Watson,
Against.
Councillor White,
For.
and Councillor Zaman.
For.
Thank you. That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, we can have a 15 minutes break now. So if you leave your systems on and just mute, and please be back in 15 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. We're on item 8. The minutes of the meeting of Cabinet and Cabinet Committee local issues are here for information to note. I move on to item 9. A maximum of 45 minutes have been allocated for this item. There is no restrictions on the number of questions any member may ask within the allocated time, subject to only one question and one supplementary at any one time. In addition to asking a question, a member may comment once for a maximum of 5 minutes on any item within the Cabinet minutes. Are there any questions to the leader, Cabinet members and Cabinet members? Who's first? Councillor Martin Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome back, everybody. Question for the leader. You are aware that after you delegated the responsibility to respond on a matter relating to planning enforcement, your Cabinet member said they thought staff were going above and beyond to deal with issues. Such a statement would suggest that the matters were being dealt with fully and applicants fully compliant with planning approval and all conditions. Sadly, this is not the case. Therefore, can I ask if you consider if going above and beyond is a suitable and truthful description when dealing with an applicant for a major development who has failed to complete the development in line with the approved plans, for an applicant who has failed to discharge conditions as required and thus affect the safety of users and also adversely affect the reputation of this council in the eyes of the public who are affected and aware of the issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pando.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I put a bet on with one of my friends that one of my councillors, for Martin Bolt, will be the first one to press his button regarding a case in his ward which we have been responding to more diligently than anything I've known, and over the Christmas period, while everybody was on holiday enjoying the festivities, my Cabinet member was diligently, along with my strategic director, responding to your issues, Martin, and I understand that you live near there, so I understand that you'll see this firsthand. I don't want to go into the details of what you're saying because you know, Martin, that we've done everything we can, and I know the Cabinet member you're referring to as well. And rather than sort of like start talking about the individual issue where we have been responding, I don't want to add anything further because I know, everybody knows that officers have actually gone out, bent over backward, and also you need to understand that we are living in unprecedented times. The pandemic is actually taking everybody and every ounce of everybody's energy. We will still continue to actually try and meet what you're asking for, but I think we will continue to do what we're doing, and I don't want to comment further because this is an individual case that's very focused in your particular ward. Thanks.
Supplementary. Councillor Bolt, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Mr. Mayor, I'm shocked and surprised to hear that Councillor Pandora is a gambling man. And can I say that he's just broken my religious rules, but they're over the first. If I may, Mr. Mayor, please. And can I just inform Councillor Pandora and anybody else, he just lost that bet because I was actually talking about the behaviour of this council in respect to the construction of the Calder Valley Greenway, a major scheme which affects 4 wards.
I didn't mention the location, Martin.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak without interruption, Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Pando, can you please let Councillor Bolt speak? Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
It's not a point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I didn't.
Councillor Bolt, can you please? Councillor Pando.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I did not mention any particular case, or I didn't mention any particular Cabinet member, because there are several issues Martin is dealing with. That's why I deliberately did not mention the issue that he's just brought up now.
Councillor Bolt, carry on, please. Thank you, Councillor Pando.
Thank you, and that was not a point of order, as the officers will clarify. You did say that I would raise something in my ward, and if you'd let me finish, you'd be educated and informed. Because The scheme I'm talking about, which was instigated in 2003, is a major scheme affecting 4 wards, including yours, Mr. Mayor. It also affects the Dalton ward and the Deaton ward, or Ashbow as it is now. It deals with active travel, and if it were built, operating in accordance with the approved planning, would offer a safe route for walkers, cyclists and equestrians. You did say I was going to speak about something in my ward near where I live, which I am not doing, and I hope that that is noted. Sadly, in the Dalton ward, as the 3 cabinet members who represent that ward are aware, the route has not been built in accordance with the planning permission. Neither has Kirklees conducted annual safety appraisals for every crossing of a road throughout the scheme as required under the planning approval. Yet, when this was raised with those cabinet members, the ward members, the short response on their behalf was, "It is not a priority." So, compliance with planning approval and conditions is not a priority or even a consideration for Cabinet. Is this going above and beyond? And do you think that Kirklees should comply with planning approvals?
Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by saying that whilst acknowledging the immense pressure that officers have been operating under, we have been contacted by several local businesses who have had significant problems accessing emergency grants recently. In some cases, messages have been received that grants have been approved, the expectations raised that payments will be made imminently, and in the event they were severely delayed. The council have asked for a number of additional checks and supporting evidence to be provided with grant applications, which, whilst being understandable, has caused further delays and no doubt increased officers' workloads. Businesses found it almost impossible to get updates from the team and turned to councillors to try and make progress with claims out of sheer desperation. These funds are a lifeline to many businesses, particularly hospitality businesses that have been hit so hard by the restrictions we have had in Kirklees for many months. Could you please confirm if the additional checks and evidence required were mandated by Kirklees or central government, as feedback from some businesses is that additional checks were not a requirement in other authorities? And could you also confirm what learning has been taken from the last round that will inform any possible future grant application programmes? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Can I ask Councillor Graham Turner, who's the current part of the portfolio?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. You're right. Some payments have not been perhaps as quick as we would have liked, but like with any process, someone is first, someone's in the middle, and somewhere is last. All the information that is requested from applicants is what's required by government. Some of these early grants had very little information that was required, but as the procedures have gone on and different grants have been instigated by government, the information has grown, and that's because that's been reflected because of some of the fraudulent activities that's been committed across the country. So that information is sometimes required, and sometimes we have to go back to people when they don't quite provide the additional information accurately enough in the first place. Just to put this in perspective, and I welcome absolutely every penny that the government is giving businesses. Since the 24th of November, we've averaged 134 payments a day. Bearing in mind part of that was Christmas, that's 134 payments a day. That works out at an average of £1,538 per claim, and we're averaging £206,424 a day. As of this evening, and I get these figures every single day, last thing of the day, total paid in the round so far, 10,527,643 to 6,842 claimants. So we're doing all we absolutely can. Don't forget, we've had to get people in this because there wasn't a system in place. So we've had to get staff in, train them up, get them paying these out. Every time a new scheme comes out, IT have to develop the online application forms. So it's not without its challenges. And as I say, I will absolutely totally support the amount of money, but we are getting out to businesses as quick as possible, bearing in mind all those restrictions that some of which are not of our making.
Supplementary, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Welcome all that. I do appreciate how difficult a task this has been, and the work that officers have put in. But I do feel that the issue of how they communicate with applicants when there is a problem needs looking at again if there's going to be any future funding. Thank you.
You may be right. There may be a little bit of better communication. The problem being with that is if you're busy answering emails, you are not processing claims. We don't have a bottomless pit of officers. As I said earlier, no officers were employed by this authority to give grants out, so they've had to be drafted in from other parts of the council, Exchequer and Welfare Services, brought up to speed, make sure they understand the legislation and the rules to get those payments out. And if we're dealing with those, answering emails, telephone calls, that's less payments that go out. As I say, 134 per day is going out, this authority. I think it's more important that we get those payments out as quickly as possible rather than answering, spending a lot of time answering questions.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe this question is to Councillor Mather. It's regarding accessible play areas in the Linley Ward in Huddersfield. I and colleagues, Councillor Smith and Councillor Eastwood, are contacted frequently by parents, carers frustrated and upset at the lack of accessible play equipment and play areas in the Linley Ward, Huddersfield, and no doubt throughout Kirklees. We've been frustrated by the responses that we've received when raising these issues around accessible play areas through councillor inquiries, with no commitment to do so, and often talk of something will happen in the future. Would you agree with me that this is totally unacceptable, and that what we need to focus on is products that open up a wide range of play opportunities for all children and natural play areas that are accessible? Currently, we create an environment that prevents many of our young people access to play equipment, natural play areas and open spaces.
Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Of course, we want to make available a wide range of opportunities and open playable spaces for all generations. And it is a pity that we have been tackling the pandemic for a whole year. And before that, there were other issues. We are trying to make sure that we get some of these programs, at least those that aren't complicated and easy to deliver, to get those done. But with the current lockdown, issues with supply chain is hampering our progress. So like all of us, it is an investment by this administration of 9.2 million, and we want our residents to benefit, and it would have been ideal to have delivered them during this pandemic, but it just hasn't been possible. So I'm not going to say that our staff are at fault. I'm just saying it's the pandemic, and soon as we can, there will be shovels in the ground. I assure you of that. Thank you.
Councillor Burke, supplementary.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mather, and I know that you are diligent and you are keen to see this provided throughout. I think the place strategy has been going on a couple of years now, and I think it was 9.5 million. Maybe it's been reduced to 9.2. I'm not sure. I understand the delays. What I'm looking for is some positive, good news to feed back to residents, those of disabled children, able children, elderly, who want to get out and about, and they want to have the resources, the equipment in place so that they can do that, and that we're not putting barriers in front of people providing equipment for the chosen few and not for anybody. Inclusive playgrounds must provide children, parents, carers and people of all abilities inclusive access and the opportunity to move throughout play space easily, safely and independently. And what I'm looking for is a commitment that I can feed back to my residents that we are going to do this and we will put equipment in place for everyone. Thank you.
And of course, I have to agree. You're reading one of our policies and the commitment is there, the money is there. But as I say, with the pandemic and issues to do with shielding, self-isolation, sickness, the supply chain, won't allow it to happen tomorrow, but hopefully it will happen as soon as possible. We're living in an area which is urban rural with countryside on our doorsteps. We've got award-winning parks and open spaces. Are you trying to tell me that everything of that nature is close to the residents of Lindley?
No, what I'm trying to say, Councillor Mather, is that we've got equipment, infrastructure in place that prevents disabled children from using them.
Councillor Berg, you can't reply back now. You've already asked the question. She's replied. Councillor Mather has replied.
Apologies,
so can we have can we move on now? Thank you.
Yeah, I just responded to her.
Well, she should not ask you that question. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question to the leader. Would you agree with Sir Keir Starmer that putting up council tax next month would be irresponsible?
Thank you, Dave. Keir Starmer was very brave, actually, and very forthright in coming forward to say that the government has actually failed local authorities. And what he said was that this is a tax bombshell of billions on local council taxpayers. Since this government, different prime ministers have been in power, council tax burden has been shifting more on local authorities, and actually council tax actually increased by 33%. So basically what Keir Starmer said was that the government should actually take more responsibility and fund councils properly. There's a £4 billion black hole already with adult social care and children's services. And that's not to mention the additional £4 billion that is still due. Hopefully that will be coming forward in the loss of money and income that all councils have suffered. So I'll email you what Keir Starmer's statement said, and I'll email you the link of what Keir Starmer said in the Sunday papers. And what he said was that this is a complete and utter disgrace, that the tax bombshell and the burden has been shifted onto local council taxpayers. We've been forced to actually increase council tax yet again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. This supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What Sir Keir also doesn't say is where the money would come from to pay for the £2 billion, which he wants the government to give to local councils. Would it not be a better idea for the Labour administration of Kirklees Council to set a budget which was more efficient than the ones they've set before and didn't raise council tax as much? Better to be seeking efficiencies and to keeping the costs down of what we provide to residents. The leader is the person who has the power to directly influence in Kirklees the level of the council tax next month. So it's up to him to back his leader and keep the council tax down. Will he vow to do so?
Yes. My leader has put the issue rightly, fairly and squarely back on government's door. Like I said, council taxpayers, since this government has been in power under different prime ministers, has raised council tax by 33%, which is completely acceptable. They've also promised the long overdue green paper on adult social care, and each time they keep on delaying it. And more recently, since March, on the back of the pandemic, I think the government did do the right thing. They did find the magic tree, and we are now into trillions of pounds worth of debt. But that doesn't mean to say that any responsibility on local government has been diminished. In fact, local government, if it wasn't for local government and councillors like the councillors on this council and all of the councillors around the country, and the LGA has actually been on the record under the current leadership and the previous leadership, asked for a fairer settlement around adult social care and children's services, and not just the two core services, but also the place-based services, where the other services will come to a standstill if we don't get properly funded. Now, we've got a choice, which is a very clear choice. Either we set a budget and look forward to a future settlement and make sure that we have a sustainable future and a viable future, so unlike other local authorities, we don't keel over, or we set a budget that is based on a whim, on very little evidence, very little advice and very little guidance. What I would not want to do is make a claim that I can fly somebody to the Bahamas on business class against a pilot who will just say that I will fly you there safely. So I'm not going to play politics with this. I'm not going to fly a kite to basically make our residents feel that I can do something that will actually cause this council to collapse. What we will do is we will do the right thing. The settlement details have only just come through, and we will work through all the details, and we will do the right thing. Of course, it's always difficult to raise council tax, whatever percentage, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5%, which is what we can go up to. But what we will do is we will do the right thing to make sure this council is sustained and delivers its services into the long term. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can we have Councillor Yusra Hussain, please?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is to Councillor Mather. It's regarding frontline workers. Obviously, during this pandemic, they've been working tirelessly out in the community trying to provide health and social care to our most vulnerable adults, whether it be mental health or physical health. I just wanted some reassurances from Councillor Mather in regards to parking and if it doesn't penalise our frontline workers especially.
Mayor, thank you, Councillor Yusra Hussain. I'm glad you are asking that question because we are, as a council, offering free parking for workers on front line of COVID-19 battle. And in the new, in the wake of the new national lockdown, Kirklees Council is supporting NHS, social workers and frontline services by offering free parking for them all in its car parks. And the council has been in contact with all of those in those categories to get in touch in order to access free parking. What it does mean is that whilst they're delivering frontline services much needed during this pandemic, they're not worried about car parking charges. Thank you.
Is this supplementary, Councillor Sam?
No, thank you. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Cooper.
Question to Councillor Peter McBride, Deputy Leader of the Council. In response to a Kirklees resident, who also happens to be a highways engineer, you said that the Egerton Road section of the A629 road widening scheme, where you're going to chop down 126 trees, is actually going to reduce carbon emissions. Is that just an assertion, or are there some robust calculations to justify your statement?
McBride?
You're on mute, Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Yeah. My statements are backed up by the combined authority, who've insisted that everything that they approve, and of course this is a West Yorkshire scheme, will be subject to proper criteria with regard to climate change. And with regard to the carbon, this scheme will offset the carbon loss by increasing the number of trees that will be provided. Now, on the one hand, you've got 89 semi-mature trees, which will be put in immediately, and additionally over 700 saplings. So in total, there will be a net significant gain. And so this is the basis of the, not merely assertion, but the confirmation by the combined authority that this is an approved scheme. And I would remind you that all schemes approved by West Yorkshire have got to be subject to a climate change considerations.
Supplementary.
Yeah.
So vehicle emission standards are going down to improve anyway as electric vehicles become mainstream without this road widening scheme. The trees you are planting to offset the carbon emissions coming from this road widening can be planted anyway without this scheme, and should be. The replacement trees have been growing, saving carbon anyway in their original location, so there are no savings there. The construction and new materials will have an additional embodied carbon component. So tell me, Councillor McBride, where are your carbon savings coming from in your £12 million road widening scheme?
The trees you refer to are certainly not planted in those locations. So the 700 saplings are certainly not planted so far, and the additional trees, the 89, are not planted. So, I mean, I don't understand what you're saying, because the trees will be put in there and they will have that net effect.
There's no carbon saving.
Thank you for that. Andrew Marchington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, I think it should be directed to Councillor Paul Davis, please. It's just seeking some reassurances, please, Paul, about what's happening to the plastic waste that's collected in Kirklees. Just a bit of a concern. The European Union was moving to ban the export of unsorted plastic waste to non-OECD countries. But apparently from the 1st of January, obviously that standard no longer applies to the United Kingdom, and the standard that is applied, the UK standard, is much lower than that. So we could be exporting unsorted waste to OECD countries outside the OECD from the UK, which presents me with some concern. I know a number of us have some concern. So Paul, yeah, just some reassurances about what's happening to the plastic waste from Kirklees, and perhaps a view on the lower standard that the UK appears to be applying.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Marchington. Certainly, in terms of what we are doing, I've not been briefed or made aware of any changes to what we've already got in place, and I have picked up exactly the areas that you were raising, and certainly, like you, I am very concerned about it. It will be. What I will do to reassure in this, I will follow up on this very quickly, and confirm what I've just said. That certainly that our position hasn't changed. But if you could let me do that, I'll come back to you certainly probably within the next few days and confirm that. But I've not been briefed by my director that there's been any change at all in what we have been doing up to date, and obviously what we've been doing up to date has been under EU legislation. I've certainly seen nothing around that, Councillor Marchington, but I will verify that and I will check that and come back to you.
Your supplementary?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for that response. That's reassuring. I mean, I'm sure you agree with me that you would be concerned that if after leaving the European Union, our environmental standards are lower than they were before.
No, absolutely. I think it's one of the. It's been one of the concerns for some time, hasn't it? That when we are recycling in the UK and seeing our plastics go into other, particularly undeveloped countries, then that certainly is not an approach that we want to take. So yeah, absolutely agree. But I will verify that. I will check the detail on that and come back to you, Councillor Marchington, with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Councillor Monroe.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This council declared a climate emergency in 2018, which included a statement on air quality. With this in mind, and in the light of the recent high-profile case concerning the death of a young girl that was attributed to polluted air from motor vehicles, please can you tell me why the council did not insist on an air quality report to be submitted with a planning application for a substantial number of houses in Lepton that lies close to Penistone Road, when all the other usual assessments were requested? Or why the council are happy to accept a report on air quality on a second development in Fennybridge, 20 metres from Penistone Road, which is inconclusive, and the council acknowledged the risk to residents from air pollution. Do you think this is acceptable?
Who was that question to?
Hello, it's probably for, it concerns the environment, so, but it also concerns planning, so I wasn't sure whether to direct it to Councillor Cathy Scott or Councillor Naheed Mather, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Probably,
Councillor Scott or Councillor Mather?
Mr. Mayor, it's not, that doesn't come under my remit. I would have thought the planning question would possibly be Councillor McBride.
Yeah.
Councillor McBride?
So Councillor Munro, can you give me the question again, please?
Yes, of course I can. As you know, the council declared a climate emergency in 2018, which included a statement on air quality. And I'm sure you'll have heard about the recent high-profile case concerning the death of a young girl that was attributed to polluted air from motor vehicles. So with this in mind, please can you tell me why the council have not insisted on an air quality report to be submitted with a planning application for a substantial number of houses in Lepton on a site that lies close to Penistone Road when all the other usual assessments were requested? Or why the council are happy to accept a report on air quality on a second development in Fennybridge, 20 metres from Penistone Road, which is inconclusive, and the council acknowledged the risk to residents from air pollution. Is that acceptable by this council? That's what I'd like to know. Thank you.
The council does insist for all planning applications that they do conform to a standard laid down by West Yorkshire. And the council, in terms of these applications and other, is applying those. If you've got details which suggest that this is not happening, I'll be interested to know the details and I will follow them through.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Right, we've come to we've got 15 minutes left now on this item. So the next person is Alex Lukic, Councillor Alex Lukic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Councillor Pandor. If council tax in Kirklees is increased by 5%, this would mean an overall increase of 26% over 5 years, more than double the rate of earnings growth or inflation. I recognise the government shares responsibility for the state of local government finances, but earlier in response to Councillor Hall, you implied that increasing council tax by a lesser amount would put this council at risk of collapse. Can I confirm for absolute clarity, because this is an incredibly serious implication, whether you stand by that implication and that our citizens should therefore expect a maximum increase of 5% to their council tax bills, even though they have just endured one of their most difficult years? You're on mute, Councillor Pandor.
Councillor Pandor?
Yeah, sorry, my apologies, Alex. Yeah, no, what I said was this government, since it's been in power under different prime ministers, council tax burden has increased up to 33% because the way the funding formulas have been changed. What I also said that the detail is still yet to be looked at in terms of what the Treasury has come back in terms of the settlement. And what we will do as an administration is make sure that we keep this council afloat into the long term, at the same time making sure that we look after our most vulnerable. Because one of the things that is very, very clear in terms of what we are seeing is it's not about looking after people like us, right, yeah, who have probably got a reasonable modest income. There are still a lot of people, and we talked about the poverty report, 60,000 households, 18,000 children who are actually living in poverty. And to make sure that we actually look after them, it costs money. So what we will do is we will look at the whole thing in its totality to make sure that our children's services run as effectively and efficiently as possible, whilst at the same time making sure that the ambitions we have set out to become one of the best children's services in the country is met. That takes resources, and you'll recall that we have actually put a lot of money back into the budget. Adult social care, we have got a growing demand on adult social care, and on the back of the pandemic, the magnitude of both adult social care and children's services has actually increased considerably. So we have to also take account of that. And based on keeping our basic services operational in terms of the place-based stuff, i.e. the roads, the payments, the gritting, the parks, the museums, all the stuff that our residents rely on us making sure that we deliver. So once you take all that into account, we will then have to predict what we need on the back of up to what level the council tax will be increased. We can raise it up to a maximum of 2 plus 3% for social care. So the 3% that we will raise, if we do raise it to the maximum 3%, will purely go on adult social care. Now, I'm sure you are aware that through the LGA, under various political leaderships, we have identified a £4 billion gap on adult social care alone, and a further gap in children's services equating to billions as well. So we have to make sure that we actually protect the most vulnerable. So once we get the figures, there will be a report that will be published just before the full council, where the Labour administration priorities will be set out. And that's where we will be very, very clear in terms of what we intend to do in terms of raising the council tax. But one thing I can assure you and everybody else and all our listeners, that we will make sure we do the right thing, and we will take the difficult decisions as we have always done that. And the interest will be to make sure that we provide the most vulnerable in our society with the best possible outcome that we can provide them with. And at the same time, we'll make sure that this council is sustained both financially, operationally, and reputationally going forward into the future.
Quick supplementary, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, carry on.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Just to confirm, do you accept that this council has ultimate responsibility for setting council tax rates, and therefore, as leader of the council, you have primary accountability for the rate of council tax we charge?
Yeah. I'm responsible for setting the council tax on the back of what the settlement is and what the government provides us with. So if the government makes sure that we get the proper adequate finances, then that will make our job more easier. Because the way the funding formula has been jigged is we have to rely more on deriving income from local sources. As you know, income has actually dropped as well in the back of the pandemic. So they are difficult decisions. I accept that it'll be my responsibility. At the same time, I don't accept that the government can be left off the hook right here by starving councils of billions.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mark Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is directed to the Cabinet Member in charge of housing, which I believe is Councillor Scott. I've got a couple of statements and then a couple of whys. So that first of all, I'd like to know why in K&H we're still doing sign-ups at K&H, but there's absolutely no delivery of allocations. So we're building up potential residents and residents that are moving internally, building up their expectation as far as sign-ups are concerned, but then we're not delivering on any allocation whatsoever. Next is that the estate officers that we have and work very hard every single day to make sure that the residents of particular estates are looked after and their cares and needs are now often taken from normal duties such as walk rounds for the reasons of safety, but then they're placed in testing stations and in the past doing leaflet handouts for COVID. And I just wondered how unsafe estate officers would be doing solitary walk-arounds, making sure that the estates and residents are being looked after on a continual basis by K&H. Would their time not be better spent attempting to do the best for the residents that we have within Kirklees? And then the next is, as far as equality is concerned, did we know within K&H that Property Services had a massive thank you letter and a voucher for £25 sent to them over Christmas, but the rest of K&H, in particular the estate managers, were received nothing. No thank you, no £25 voucher. And these people were actually reallocated into COVID task force work and trying to keep up with their day-to-day work as well, which I find stretches the inequalities as far as the department's concerned. Is that okay, Councillor Scott?
Yes, that's fine, Councillor Thompson. Sorry,
Council,
Mr. Mayor, am I okay?
Councillor Scott, before you answer the question, I think he's asked, Councillor Thompson has asked you 2 questions, so he won't get a supplementary. So carry on, please.
Right, okay. Regarding the sign-ups, Councillor Thompson, you're absolutely right. There was a delay in the sign-ups. I believe they're back on track again. The reason why the sign-ups were taking place and the housing allocations, it was because of the lockdown. But also, when a house becomes dormant, in that period, the water supplies are turned off, and they have to test for Legionella. So there was a catch-up period on all the voids, which took over 2 weeks. You've got to take 2 tests over a 2-week period and get a clear result on that. So I do believe that's back in action at the moment. On the estate walkabouts, yes, they're actually doing drive-abouts. There was the odd estate walkabout. We're trying to protect our staff as much as possible within K&H. So I'll take your point on, and I'll come back to you personally on that, and anybody else, other councillors, to find out what exactly is happening. I am aware about the voucher scheme. These were lower paid staff that were given it as in recognition for all the hard work that they've done. Yeah, and I'm talking on the very low end scale that I've done a lot of things. I'll get you a written response with the rest of that, just to make sure it's clear. But it was higher tier management that didn't get it, but the lower tier that were moved around to help out and have done over and above. That's where the money was allocated to them vouchers.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a question to the leader. Realising that Councillor Pandor quite often quotes Robert Jenrick in our meetings, I'll just remind him that recently Mr. Jenrick said authorities were not under any obligation to increase bills. We're talking about council tax here. So the people of Kirklees no longer accept this dodging by this administration, blaming the government for their incompetence in setting and maintaining a prudent budget. So I'm going to ask again, will the leader of Kirklees Council commit to a minimal council tax increase in this year's budget, given the hardship being faced by so many Kirklees residents?
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, I can't commit to that or either way at this moment in time. One of the things I am doing is I am actually in constant dialogue with Robert Jenrick, and to be fair, Robert Jenrick, when this pandemic started, and this is on the record across all local authorities through the LGA, he did say very, very clearly that local authorities need to do what they need to do to make sure that they carry on and to make sure that they get through the pandemic and do whatever it takes. And to be honest with you, I feel sorry for him, because what's happened is I think the Treasury, because of the way the Treasury operates, has actually come down and actually pulled him back a little bit. And the LGA itself, which is not led by one of my, well, it's led by a Conservative leader, Gary Porter, and I forgot the guy who leads on it now. But anyway, they have been very, very clear that there is a massive issue in terms of funding local government as we move forward. And they've also very, very clearly said that we need to make sure that any funding gaps in income generation or loss of income is fully compensated by central government to local government, and that's the dilemma we're in. So what I will do is I will make sure that I do the right thing, based on the advice I get, based on what other people say, and based on the risk. What I don't want to do is take the easy route out, whatever that is, and be in a position where we actually have got to curtail our plans and our ambitions. There's a lot of good work we've done. There's a lot of good work we've done on a cross-party basis, and I will continue to use that goodwill. But at the same time, I will make the right decision, and I'll be held to account, which I accept. But I hear what you're saying, and we'll see what the budget brings out. But at the same time, we can't allow the government, don't matter who the government is, what colour they are, to actually be let off the hook for not delivering on their commitments in terms of how they will fund local government.
Thank you for that. Is that supplementary?
Yeah, I mean, given that you've refused really to commit to that, will you be honest with the people of this borough and explain to them why, when your party leader says that absurd council tax rises should be scrapped to ease the pressure on family budgets, can you level with the people of Kirklees? Rule out a 5% rise now.
Yeah. What my leader has said with the leaders of the LGA is local government should not be bearing the brunt of public finance cuts. And what my leader has also said, that it's actually completely unfair to actually force councils into a corner with no other option but to increase council tax. You know, the easy solution would be for the government to say that actually we're going to provide you with the resources to fund social care properly. We're going to provide you with the resources to fund children's services. And we're going to provide resources to fund the other place-based services, and that would be fair. That is the fairest way forward. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen.
Councillor Will Simpson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Councillor Peter McBride, if he could provide us with an update to the Council on the TransPennine upgrade to our local rail network.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The upgrade, we are being given different information. We've had 3 sets of government statements regarding TransPennine. First of all, they were going to spend £5 billion on this. Then they were going to pause it. Then they were going to do it in part, and that we were going to get something like 2.5 billion. That policy was paused, and now the latest statement is a kind of achievement. There's a commitment to spend 500 million between Huddersfield and Ravensthorpe. Now, the presumption prior to that was that that would cost at least £1 billion. And so that part of the scheme is not funded. So we don't know what that 500 million means. We do know it will be spent in that area, but we do know it's also insufficient. And so we could do with clarity on this. We in West Yorkshire have been waiting for a statement regarding this. And of course, it in turn links into, what is going to be the main route across Pennine. And we're getting different information with regard to that. On the one hand, they're going ahead with this link through Bradford, and on the other, they're rethinking the whole policy. My guess is they will revert to the link through TransPennine being the main link, and that's only a guess, but it's informed by a rethink by both Cabinet and by Network Rail, and so we have reasonable hopes that may be ultimately the policy. But so far, there is no commitment to it. So we're left up in the air. On the one hand, knowing exactly what we have got to do, because we have a part to play in this, in order to achieve that 500 million improvement, and what will be remaining and what will be left to do. So we're up in the air with this policy, as we have been for nearly 10 years now, because people have been promised there was going to be this effective link across the Pennines, and it was only a matter of time. TransPennine was going to cost what it would cost, and they were going to fund it. And then they were going to committed to fund it in part, and now a commitment to fund it even in much less part. So we really don't know where we stand on this. We have some recent information to suggest that the government is about to make its mind up on this and which scheme it's going to back. But the situation is very confused, because people who've been watching this event very carefully over at least 10 years have not got some clarity, and do need it, because we need well, from the point of view of the economic future of Kirklees, it's crucially important. And from the point of view of the council, what we need to do to work with Network Rail and what part of the scheme the government...
Councillor McBride, you've gone over 5 minutes now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
I've got a supplementary,
Simpson,
Mr. Mayor.
Supplementary, yeah.
Yeah, on the issue of rail investment and getting different information from the government than what we've been promised. Can I ask the same cabinet member whether he shares my concern at the suggested abandonment of the eastern arm of HS2 whilst maintaining the southern investment, and whether he shares my view that this isn't just a betrayal of the kind of infrastructure investment that we were promised in the north, but at such a high price, if it doesn't deliver for the north, it brings into question the value for money for taxpayers in the north of the scheme in its entirety.
I think that this is even more critical than the Transpennine decision. Any suggestion that there's going to be no eastern arm suggests that the whole of West Yorkshire will be adversely affected. We do need that eastern arm because not merely the link with London, which at the moment is not adequate, but much more importantly, that arm links Leeds to Sheffield. It links Leeds to Birmingham. At the moment, it takes 2 hours to get from Leeds to Birmingham. It takes 45 minutes to get to Sheffield. These are ridiculous times for these trains. It shows the inadequacy of the provision. We're talking about Leeds as the outside London, the second biggest city. Birmingham is the first outside London. Those links are absolutely crucial. It is not only links with London that are important, it's links with other key economic centres. Also, there's been a tendency in all this planning to forget Sheffield. Sheffield is crucial in all this. We need a very good link to Sheffield, as in turn Sheffield does to Manchester, because all of these places relate to each other and the distances are very small. We do need a guarantee that these huge centres of industry are properly connected, and by up-to-date rail schemes. And so any abandonment of HS2's eastern arm would be, from our point of view, a catastrophe, and it would mean that Leeds would be a backwater compared to Manchester. At the moment, it's our second most important financial centre in Britain, Leeds, and it's crucially important. If it's going to retain that status, it has got to have that degree of connectivity. So this is a real plea from the heart that we do establish the need and the right to have the eastern arm, crucial to the whole economy of the north. Thanks, Will, for the question.
Thank you for that. This item is concluded now, so we move on to item 10. The minutes of the meeting of committees at agenda item 10 are here for information to note. Item 11, a maximum of 15 minutes has been allocated for this item. Question to chairs of committees, subcommittees and panels, and on matters within their term in reference, including the minutes at item 10. Are there any questions? Councillor Martin Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Councillor Simpson, Corporate Governance and Audit. As the chair of the committee responsible for corporate governance, do you think that decisions affecting the public should be made in open, following consultation, and not behind closed doors, and not just informed people when they've been done? I'm aware of a significant change in the administration of the planning process, which has been brought in with no public consultation to the detriment of the whole borough. Do you think this is good?
I'm not particularly sure that is within my remit as chair of corporate governance and audit, Martin, but I will say that I do think that decisions should be open and transparent. Yeah.
Supplementary then, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah.
It directly refers to the governance. It's a matter that members of the public who now wish to submit comments and concerns about planning will have their private details, their address and everything published, so that unscrupulous developers may choose to contact them, harass them, or otherwise. Now, this is a change which I believe should have been subject to public consultation. We should have been asking the sitting members what they found, and I think it should be something which is done with equality. If a resident has got to have their private details disclosed, then let's have all details disclosed. Those of, for example, where an applicant lives, not just an accommodation address. Can we revisit this, please, Will?
It's been my understanding that we don't share those details. If there's been a change, it's not something that I've been aware of. As I said, I don't believe it's in my remit, but you raised it, Martin. It's been heard by myself, the whole council and the executive team. I will speak to the relevant cabinet member and get back to you.
Much obliged, Will, thanks.
Councillor Bernard McGuinn. Councillor Bernard McGuinn. I think this headset's not working. Come back to him then. Right, we'll come back to you. I think his system's not working. So, Councillor John Taylor. Can you unmute, please?
Sorry, I was on mute. I muted myself. Sorry. My question's for Councillor Pandor as the representative of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, if that's okay, Shabir. Hopefully it's a straightforward one. As you know, as I've spoken often in this virtual chamber, I'm very keen to see improvements in the Penistone line, which I believe is similar to the discussion we were having slightly earlier, one of the key railways that are within our borough. I've been working with local MPs, and also we've been, through our local MPs, been liaising with Dan Jarvis in South Yorkshire to look at proposals to bring improvements to the Penistone line and to secure funding from the government. I've also been meeting with the Railway Minister as well. Will you support at the West Yorkshire Authority proposals to improve the service on the Penistone line, and specifically look at ways in which we can move from an hourly service to a half-hourly service by improving the number of passing places on the line, which will enable that half-hourly service?
Yeah, thanks, John, for that question, and it's quite a serious point you raised regarding the Penistone line. So in terms of the last bit you mentioned, in terms of the increasing the frequency, yes, I do, but I think the debate's a bit bigger than that, and maybe Peter might want to come in, so might Peter to come in at the end to just add some value to the question. Let me finish, Peter. I think firstly, what the Combined Authority don't really understand and is we've got our lead Combined Authority, the Leeds City region, and then on the western side we've got the Manchester City region, the Manchester Combined Authority. And we've also got a really good opportunity to link in to the South Yorkshire Combined, Sheffield City region. So I've already started to have the debate at leaders level with my counterparts across West Yorkshire that we need to bring the Penistone line focus and actually make sure that it's not just a single line, it's actually a double line, and it actually becomes part of the mainstream. And it's going to be a big lobbying event to actually go through. But I think the more we can get our MPs involved, right, across Kirklees, the better that we need to actually push. And I think going into the next municipal year, with whoever the mayor is, you need to actually collectively get some, probably maybe in the future, get something at this council where we pass a resolution so we actually get a full party commitment behind it. But anyway, I'll leave that and I'll bring Peter in because he might.
Well, actually, if I can have my supplementary first, if that's okay.
Yes,
And the reason for that you'll understand when I ask my supplementary. That is because when I had a meeting before Christmas with one of our local MPs and with officers and with Councillor McBride, Councillor McBride said that improving the service for the stations on the Penston line wasn't a priority for the administration, and that what he wanted was a non-stopping service between Huddersfield and Barnsley. And I'm just wondering whether that is actually the Labour administration's policy or whether that's Peter's personal view. And can we be clear about what we'll be lobbying for at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority? Because I'm hoping it is to improve the service for the residents that are serviced by the Penistone line, and not just a non-stopping service between Barnsley and Huddersfield, as Peter said was his ambition.
Yeah. I'll bring Peter in a minute, Peter. So it basically, so Peter, just clarify what the position is, right? Yeah, because I think Peter's probably more passionate and more energetic and more behind this than I am. But I'll let Peter come in. Peter, your opportunity. You're on mute, Peter.
Point in the meeting that I'm passionately concerned that we do have that fast link between Barnsley and Huddersfield. The point I was making is to achieve that, one of the trains will have to go faster than the other because one will loop off, and that was confirmed in a message I got today from West Yorkshire, and that can be achieved if we have that common objective. And I think you may have misunderstood. I certainly want that. I've been to Barnsley to plead with them to lobby with me to achieve just that. We want that fast link. I reckon the cost would be about 5 million, but anything that would try to achieve the same speed or the same times on both lines would cost, and the figures were given to me today, well over 30 million. We're not going to get that. But I think for just over 5 million, possibly a little more than that, that's an estimate of about 5 or 7 years ago, we could achieve it. It would be very good value for money and a benefit to all concerned. So I think we can agree on that, John. I think there's an element of misunderstanding in that meeting. I really do.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Thank you for that. Can we go back to Councillor Bernard McGuinn? I think.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can I ask Councillor Hall, the strategic planning chairman, what input did they have into the decision about publishing people's objecting to planning decisions or planning applications? Did they have any input at all into the decision to make the addresses of objectors known?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't know about that until about Huddersfield Examiner this morning. So when I finished work this morning, I've been chasing around trying to get an answer. Now I've got an answer from an officer. What it does, it draws us into line with other West Yorkshire authorities who will do exactly the same thing. But what I'll do is I'll get a copy of this statement that I was sent this afternoon, and I think it's worthwhile that it is sent out, and it's only fair that it's sent out to all councillors as well. There's no untoward, we're not doing anything shady, or we're not doing anything to quieten people. People are still going to have the same access to put their views forward, and we're still going to listen to them. That just being brought into line, just same as other authorities in West Yorkshire. But I will get on to officers and ask them to get this statement sent out to councillors, and they know exactly what's going on.
Supplementary?
Yeah.
Do you think, Steve, that this will improve the democratic process, make it more open and fair?
I thought personally, I thought we've got a good system
the way that things are. But I've had a chance to look at it because, as I say, I only found out about it this morning. I'll pass comments if and when I see it up and running and see how it goes. When it's something new like this, to pass comment on it until you know how it's up and running. It's a learning curve for us all. At least not me who happens to chair this committee.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Councillor Smage. Councillor Smage.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was around the putting people's addresses on comments on planning applications. And until we can get this clarified, just because other West Yorkshire authorities do this, doesn't mean that we should necessarily do this. But until we can get this clarified, could we suggest that there is a suspension of putting people's addresses on their comments until it is clarified, until we can find a system that works for Kirklees? Thank you.
What I can say to you on it is tomorrow I've got another briefing with officers, planning briefing, and I'll certainly bring it up tomorrow and ask for best way forward. Like I've said earlier, I do believe that people have the right to put their objections in and to be heard. So I shall take that up tomorrow, Liz, no problem.
Supplementary, Mr. Mayor.
Carry on.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that people's comments should be stopped from coming in. I was just suggesting that their personal information was not put on until it can be clarified. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Who was the question to?
I was addressing Councillor Hall in, yes, and I think he's answered me. Yes.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Thank
you. Thank you for that, Councillor Lukage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Councillor Homewood for West Yorkshire Combined Authority Transport Committee. Do you agree that the sudden permanent closure of Dewsbury Bus Station Travel Centre by Arriva Yorkshire should be condemned? And does West Yorkshire Combined Authority commit to providing a replacement staffed travel centre at the time of the planned redevelopment of the bus station?
Thanks, Councillor Lucic. Well, certainly I think it would have been helpful if Arriva had informed people what was going on with this, because I think it wasn't even properly announced. It was just mentioned in response to a question at one of the transport committees, and it wasn't properly briefed to people. I think my understanding of it is there is some issues with they had some issues with the viability of the service going forward. I think because of I mean, you'd have to ask Arriva on the reasons, but I think it's to do with the fact that they're going to see a decline in sort of the sale of tickets on the sort of longer bus journeys, which was a key part of their operation. So yeah, I certainly think they should have been more open and transparent about that and properly consulted on it. In terms of what West Yorkshire are going to do about that now, certainly yes, I think we need to look at what provisions we can put in place. I don't think that's been committed to yet, but certainly that's something I'm happy to take forward as a member of the committee to see what provisions we can put in place in the future. Obviously, it's a bit difficult at the moment because the operations weren't open anyway. But in a post-COVID world, we've got a new bus station. Yeah, I agree. We should be pushing for that, and I'll certainly take that up with the combined authority.
Thank you, Councillor Homewood. You've preempted my supplementary, so no supplementary.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to the 15 minutes. So that's end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.